Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I'm doing a video on a hypothetical civil war, okay, or second revolution. Okay, and basically this is hypothetical. The purpose of this is basically so that you guys kind of figure out what you would need to prepare for. What you would need to to store, so that you could survive such an event. I'm not telling you guys to go out and start a revolution. Basically this is a hypothetical discussion, okay? So the first thing that we would need is some sort of a catalyst, okay? That's what would be required, okay? And it's not just something like, the government, taking away rights, be it freedom of speech or gun rights. And the reason why we know this is that because in places like California and New York, they've already restricted people's gun rights. They've already restricted people's freedom of speech. They already have red flag laws in place in those places. So none of these things have caused a massive uprising. Okay, so there would have to be something more than that. There'd have to be a more serious catalyst, and that would be either a natural disaster or extreme government action. Okay, a natural disaster would be something like more on a global scale than on a regional scale. Because for example, like when we have, let's say, Hurricane Katrina, I mean that was a regional disaster, but that was a situation where other states were not affected and they could come in and help. What we're talking about here is like a massive asteroid falling, or the super volcano at Yellowstone Park going off. Something that would affect at least half the country, and cause food shortages. Okay, and that's one of the keys here: food shortages and shelter shortages. Lots of homes being destroyed due to some massive natural disaster. So that would be a catalyst, okay? And another type of catalyst would be extreme government action. Something like door-to-door confiscations, okay? And the reason why I say wide-scale door-to-door confiscations, because basically if somebody's breaking the door at 2 o'clock in the morning, the natural thing for people to do will to assume that they're a victim of some type of a home invasion, and they're going to go to that door armed. Okay, so now we have so during any wide scale gun confiscations, you're gonna have in some cases people shooting intentionally. In other cases, people shooting accidentally because they don't know what's going on. Okay, so something like door-to-door confiscations, I can see that as extreme government action that would cause a catalyst for a civil war type of situation. Okay, so that's one thing. You need a catalyst. Okay, now what would be the result of this? The result of this would be extreme unrest. Okay, and that extreme unrest would create factions. Okay. The most likely breakup between factions would be urban versus rural, okay? Because you have the people in the cities, they got one type of mindset, and the people in the rural areas, they have another type of mindset. So that would most likely be the division that you would see in a modern day civil war. It wouldn't be like a north type versus south type of thing. It wouldn't be something that's racial, like it wouldn't be like the white people against Indians or something like that, because that's not how the country is split up at this point. The country at this point is split up. We have urban people that live in cities versus country people. Okay, that's where your biggest divisions are. And what you would see there is that basically the country people, they obviously control the food supplies. And they control the roads between these cities. So you can see a situation there where they're cutting off food supplies, they're cutting off energy supplies, they're cutting off the electricity that feeds the cities. They're possibly cutting off the water supplies, because sometimes these cities typically have water reserves that are fed from outside of the cities. So that's a typical type of situation, right? And then you would see like obviously the cities at that point would be in a pretty desperate situation, and you can see them trying to break out, to protect those roads and those supply lines and so forth. Okay, so that's a more that's what I would expect as far as the type of factions that would develop if there was some type of wide scale unrest. Okay. Now the question now becomes is, would there be military intervention or would there not be military intervention? Okay. If there was very wide scale unrest, okay, and there was any military intervention, I can see this turning into a major bloody civil war really fast, because what's going to happen is the military is not trained so much to arrest. They are basically trained to go in and kill anybody that appears to be an enemy combatant. Okay, that's what they're primarily trained to do. Okay, while sometimes in isolated instances they're able to scale that down, on a wide scale level, okay, they're going to be less and less careful. Okay, that's the way that something like that would naturally work out. Okay, and what's going to happen is, as they're doing their house to house clearing, presumably to collect the guns, to find out who the people, looking for potential leaders of revolutions. As they're going house to house, what's going to happen is, people are going to get killed on both sides. In some cases, you're going to have people defending their homes, because you're going to have cases where military are going into the wrong homes. Okay, and you're going to have people getting killed on both sides. And what's going to happen out of that is that's going to lead to a civil war within the military. Because what's going to happen is that a lot of those civilians that are going to accidentally be killed by the military, are going to have family that are also in the military. Okay, so now you're going to have within the military, you're going to have certain people in the military saying that we shouldn't be doing this, and some people saying yes, we should be doing this. And now that's going to lead to the military fighting itself. Okay, so that's a situation where the military does get involved. In a situation where the military does not get involved, then that's left to police. Okay, now police, the way police are trained. First of all, police are trained primarily to they're trained to act as an entire police department. The way when there's a major problem. If there's a shooting event, or some type of mass shooting, police typically wait until they, gather numbers, and then they will typically try to outnumber, the bad guy. Okay, that's what their training is. They wait for backup. When they have vastly superior numbers, that's when they move in. Okay, police are not really trained to go into to get into a gunfight. To intentionally go into a gunfight where it's a 50-50 chance where they might live or die. Okay, and that's contrary to military training. Okay, although our military doesn't practice it so much. Lots of militaries around the world do practice. For example, let's say hard charges. The U.S. military, for example, let's say during the last Civil War, they practiced hard charges. So they were perfectly willing to accept large numbers of casualties in order to advance or to gain a victory. Okay, but that's definitely not the type of mindset of the police. The police don't have the mindset that they're going to charge and take a hard position. Okay, so if the police don't feel that they have superior numbers, that they can safely go in and make arrests, or put down dangerous people, they are not going to do that. Okay, and again, the example, I referred to this earlier. The example is Hurricane Katrina. Okay, when the police saw that they could not take control of the situation, they basically left the area. Okay, they chose not to do anything. Okay, another situation was, let's say, the Parkland shooting. Okay, the police did not enter the building to try and save the students, until they had superior numbers. Okay, so that's what you can expect from the police. Okay, that's what their training is. Wait for backup. Okay, wait for backup. If they have to defend themselves in a given situation, like during a traffic stop, of course they're going to defend themselves. But they're not going to charge into a situation where they don't think they have superior numbers. Okay, so the result of this, okay, is that in a wide scale civil unrest, what's likely to happen is the police are not going to get involved. Okay, they're not going to get involved. Now, in some situations, I can see them, if they do get involved, they're going to basically become the local rebel leader, okay, or the local warlord, okay. So if they do get involved, again, that's a situation where they either have control or they're trying to gain, complete control. So that's the only way I can see the police getting involved in a civil war type of situation. Because again, they don't, police are not trained to charge into situations that they can't win. Okay, so that's what we can expect from the police in a civil war type of situation. Okay, how about the people? Okay, so and again, I'm using a list here because I normally don't use lists. I don't the stuff I usually talk about is unscripted, but there's just so much detail here that. It's kind of hard to discuss this topic without having some sort of an outline. Okay, so the people, where do the people fall? Where are they going to land in something like this? Okay, so the first thing to understand is that in a civil war, in a real civil war, right, there are no non-combatants. Okay, in a civil war, there's basically, if I'm, let's say, on one particular side of a faction, okay, there's people that are loyal to my faction, and everybody else is basically an enemy. Okay, that's how civil wars are. When we look at, let's say, the last American Civil War, okay, to some extent, a lot of the information that we get is somewhat limited because the victors do get to write history. Okay. We do know that the North was having a real hard time winning, making progress until General Sherman took a very aggressive approach in the South, and he basically started burning his way through the South. Okay, so one of the things that we can see from General Sherman's style of attack and victories is that terror works. Okay, and that's not something that's a secret. Okay, if you study other civil wars, like for example after World War II, or during World War II, when the Nazis expanded throughout Europe, they destroyed a lot of the governments. Okay, throughout Europe, and what happened was after the Nazis were defeated, there was a power vacuum created in many countries throughout Europe. And what happened is there were civil wars as a result of that power vacuum. Okay, and I have family in Europe, and I had a chance. And I'm going back like 20 years. A lot of those people aren't alive anymore, but I had a chance to talk to people that lived through a real civil war. Okay. And what happens is a lot of us look at, let's say, like the civil war in Iraq and Afghanistan, where they're cutting heads off and murdering innocent people and murdering people as warnings. And we think, the tendency is to think that that's the exception, okay, that those people are really animals, okay. And I know from having talked to survivors of civil wars in Europe that that's not the exception, that is the norm, okay. That's how civil wars are. Civil wars quickly turn into wars of terrorism. In the part of Europe that I'm from, okay, there was lots of house burnings. Okay, there was lots of killing of the family members of people suspected to be in the opposing faction. There was a lot of the gutting of pregnant women of people, men suspected to be of the opposite faction. Okay. So that's a real civil war, okay, and that's Europe. So you can't just say, okay, that's just the Middle East where they act so savage. No, here's Europe, and most of us are of some European descent. So civil wars are brutal, and they quickly turn into a war of terrorism. Okay, so that's one of the things to keep in mind with civil wars. Okay, in going back to the World War II type of situation. Okay, when the Germans were going through Europe, okay, unless there was an actual war in your town, in many cases the towns were not really affected. Okay, unless there was actual fighting in the towns. The people still went about their business of growing their crops, feeding their livestock, and eating, okay? And the reason is because the economies were very localized. People were back then in Europe depended mostly on animal labor, okay, to plant their crops and so forth. Today, especially in the United States, there is no farm, even a small farm, even my farm, okay, which is just a few acres, okay, that is dependent on animal labor, okay. All farms are dependent on diesel, okay, and diesel comes from a totally different part of the country, so even though I grow my own food, okay, without diesel, okay, without the ability to grow food, I would starve just as fast as the people in the cities, okay. And the other thing with livestock is that modern day livestock, because of the basically modern day livestock like chickens, for example, right, are bred to produce so much. They grow fast, they grow big. Chickens lay lots of eggs, and they require very high sources of protein. Okay, so even if you've got, let's say, 100 chickens, you need a lot of high protein feed for those chickens, okay? And in most cases, the land that cannot support the livestock. So what happens is most chicken farms, for example, what they do is we have to buy chicken feed, okay? So and again, the point is that in a wide scale civil war, even the farmers would be starving to death, okay? So that's just something for you guys, to keep in mind with that, okay? And I know because like I said, I have a tractor. My tractor is absolutely useless unless I can put diesel in it, okay? So in a well, here's the thing, and this goes back to the war of, all civil wars are basically turned into wars of terrorism. Each side of the faction is going to attack the food supplies. They're going to attack the energy supplies. Okay, they're going to attack the power grid. Okay, the power grid is extremely vulnerable. Okay, basically, if you look at the transformers on top of the telephone poles, okay, 122 will knock one of those things out, right? So a 22 rifle will knock one of those transformers out. It takes almost a whole day to replace one transformer. Okay. And there's a very limited supply of transformers out there. So rebel groups on each side would basically knock out the power grid. Okay, so basically the city people are going to try to knock out the power grids in the country. The country people are going to try to knock out the power grid in the cities. And here's the thing. Most, especially if you're in the northern part of the United States, most heating systems depend on electricity. Okay, most heaters will not work, even if you have an oil burner or a propane burner. It will not work without some form of electricity. Okay, so before you even starve to death, you're going to freeze to death. Okay, and a rebel leader is going to time his attack. Okay, a rebel leader from either side of the faction, right? Because we're not taking sides here now. Any rebel leader who's halfway competent is going to time his attacks so that they occur on the coldest days of the winter. Okay, so that's something that's going to be factored in. And and what they're looking to do is they're looking to basically create even more chaos, more unrest, because then out of that chaos and unrest, they can recruit people to their side. Okay, and get them to fight for them because. It goes back to what I said earlier. People, a revolution or a civil war needs a catalyst. Okay, you're not going to, today you're not going to get people to participate in any type of a revolution or civil war because everybody's pretty comfortable on their sofa watching their TV, and drinking their beer. Okay, so comfortable people don't go to war. So on either side of this faction, you're going, the goal of the rebel leaders is going to be to make the population as uncomfortable as possible, so that they have an incentive to fight for one side or the other. Okay, so that's one of the things to keep in mind with how a civil war or a rebellion would be motivated. Okay, and again, this is all hypothetical here. Basically, I'm using history, to kind of figure out what would happen, in a modern day scenario. Okay, so the other thing and the final thing is foreign intervention. Okay, there's no way that a wide-scale civil war could happen without foreign intervention. Okay, it didn't. The American Revolution, happened with French intervention. Okay, in fact, the victory at Yorktown was the result of French intervention, because basically they were blockading British ships that were on their way to evacuate British troops. Okay, and because the French stopped, blockaded those ships or kept them busy, so they couldn't blockade they couldn't pull out the British troops. They ended up surrendering at Yorktown. Okay, so our very own American Revolution was won with military intervention. Okay, not foreign intervention. And the thing to understand about that is the reason why the French helped us was not so much because they cared about our liberty, our freedom, because remember, that was a monarchy. Okay, the French were still a monarchy at the time. The reason why they intervened to help us is because they wanted to weaken their enemy, the British. Okay, so that would be the mindset of different nations around the world. Right now the U.S. is the world's greatest superpower, and those nations around the world, China, Russia, Pakistan, all these countries, even Britain. Okay, because remember, Britain was once the world superpower, and you better believe that they are envious of the United States. Okay, because we were once their colonies, and now all of a sudden, they're just a little island nation. Okay, so that's so even our allies in Europe would have an incentive to try and weaken the United States, so they can use that as an opportunity for them to gain more power. And basically, what I would expect is they would basically help either side or both sides. Okay, that would be, and that's pretty much typical U.S. policy too. I mean, I'm pretty sure the United States has throughout many times has aided both sides, just to keep the war going. So that's what I would expect. I would expect that nations around the world to aid factions, either both sides of factions or four sides, because remember, they could be more than one or two factions. They could be 10 factions, or you could have two factions that break up into multiple factions. I would expect foreign intervention for the purpose of making the United States weaker and weaker, and preventing it from ever reforming as a United States. Okay, so here's some things for you guys to think about. Okay, and and like I said, this is all hypothetical, and post some comments. Let me know what you guys think. I'll talk to you guys next time.